Welcome to Season 4, Episode 9 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm going to share some thoughts on how to fight disillusionment in teaching when the school year is just not going how you planned. Visit truthforteachers.com to get the transcript, links to recommended resources, and to share your thoughts on the show. The first roadblock of discouragement tends to hit a little sooner than most teachers are expecting. When you're new to the profession, you assume that disillusionment is something that you won't have to deal with until you've been in the classroom for years. So when you realize on day 3 of your career that the reality of teaching isn't going to even remotely align with what your expectations were, you might experience this moment of panic where you're suddenly questioning all of your life choices. But it's not just new teachers that this happens to. When you've been in the profession for a while, you realize that some disillusionment is a normal part of teaching, but you convince yourself that this year will be different. This year, you're more prepared. This year, you're more experienced. You're going to be ready for whatever comes your way. And so it still manages to surprise you somehow when it only takes a week or two of school before that great plan that you had for the year starts to fall apart. And all your prior confidence just feels like you were being really naive. And all your preparations feel kind of pointless, like you'd been planning lessons and procedures for this fantasy world that just doesn't match up with what you're actually teaching in. Here's what I want you to know when you hit that point. First off, feeling some disillusionment is normal, even at the very beginning of the school year, because it's impossible to accurately predict the challenges you'll face. Disillusionment happens to almost all of us. Teaching is a really tough job, and it's almost impossible to imagine, much less prepare, for the depth and the scope of all the challenges that you're going to be expected to overcome. We all get this picture in our minds of what our students are going to be like, and then when we truly start to understand all the situations that they're facing and all the issues that they're bringing to the classroom, we realize we're going to have to adjust our expectations. So it's very normal for that to feel discouraging. Be ready for it to happen. That way it won't throw you off your game. The reality of what you're actually going to be dealing with this school year will probably hit you like a slap in the face at some point. And when you couple that with all of your best laid plans getting constantly thwarted by all these unexpected demands on your time and ridiculous inconveniences and just silly requests and the sheer exhaustion that comes from teaching, well, then disillusionment is going to be par for the course. So it's not fun to deal with, but you're certainly not alone in facing it, and you can overcome it. I want you to know that the way that you feel right now will not last all year. The beginning of the year is, without a doubt, the busiest, most demanding season of the year for a teacher. So you can't look at your current workload and your current low energy level and start questioning, how in the world am I going to keep this up for another 8, 9, 10 months? And there's no way I can do it. And even in the middle of the year, you can't just start counting down the days and trying to envision yourself managing that, whatever that is for you, for another 78.5 grueling days. Allowing yourself to think like that, to keep wondering, how in the world am I going to keep this up for X amount of days left this year? That's going to deplete whatever little bit of energy you have. The key to finding the light at the end of the tunnel is to avoid this presumption that your current situation is permanent. With any stressful situation in life, you want to resist the urge to assume that things will stay that difficult for a long time. Because as we know, life is always changing. New challenges will come your way, old challenges will be resolved. I can guarantee that you will not be dealing with this exact same set of problems a few months from now. Your workload will change, your students will change, you will change. Some of these changes will be for the better, and a few things are going to change for the worse, but it will all be different. You will not feel exactly like this for every single day of the entire school year. So don't weigh yourself down by imagining how it's going to feel after 10 months of this. You're not going to have 10 months of this. I also want you to know that constantly thinking and talking about how bad your situation is not going to make the situation feel easier to bear. But examining the evidence to support your assumptions, that will make it easier. So stop telling yourself, and stop telling anyone who will listen, how outrageous and how crazy the situation is, and can you believe that I'm having to do this, and this is just so ridiculous, just not acceptable. Stop telling yourself that. Stop telling other people that. And instead, think about the situation from an objective, realistic standpoint. Here's a couple of questions that I want you to ask yourself. Ask, is my situation completely bad, a total failure? There are a few situations that don't have at least some good in them. That's why we have this old saying about every cloud having a silver lining, right? If you're telling yourself that a situation with a student is totally hopeless, or a lesson was a complete disaster, or your job is absolutely miserable, then you're being pessimistic. You're not being realistic. The reality is the situation is not all bad. You're simply choosing not to see the part that's good. You're pretending like that part doesn't exist. So start by asking yourself, is the situation completely bad? Is it a total failure? Also ask yourself, is the problem truly unbearable? A lot of times we'll say, I can't stand this. I can't possibly do this. But you are bearing it, so it's not unbearable. And other teachers are bearing much worse. A lot of what we complain about is nothing more than a first world problem. Something that a teacher with 75 students sitting on a dirt floor in Uganda in 110-degree heat would be thrilled to put up with a lot of the problems that we complain about. All suffering is relative, and you can handle a lot more than you give yourself credit for. So stop telling yourself that you can't stand it, your problem's unbelievable. Come to terms with reality. It's happening. It's not unbelievable. Believe it. Deal with it. So ask yourself, is the situation completely bad, a total failure? Is it truly unbearable? And ask yourself, is it possible that the situation may not be the way that I perceive it, and that there's an alternative explanation? Most of the time when we're unhappy, it's really not the circumstance that's making us miserable. It's our interpretation of it. It's a story that we tell ourselves about the circumstance. If you can consider that there are other less miserable ways to experience the problems that you're facing, maybe by seeing how one of your colleagues is coping, then you've taken a huge step toward changing the way you experience a difficult situation, because now you understand that your present experience is not the only possibility. So consider that the situation may not be the way you perceive it. Lastly, I want you to ask yourself, is it useful or beneficial for me to perceive things this way? You may truly have a class that never stops talking. You may have a perpetually broken photocopier, or a parent that is just determined to get you written up. But ask yourself whether it's helpful in any way for you to choose to see your situation like that. I mean, let's say that a student has a 42% average and the quarter ends on Friday. It could be completely true and accurate to think, well, she's going to fail the class. There's nothing I can do about it. That's probably true. It's probably accurate. But does thinking about that help you teach your classes with enthusiasm and energy? Does it stir up feelings of compassion towards the student so that you're motivated to help her do better next quarter? Does it make you feel good about yourself and your work as a teacher? If a thought or a perception doesn't make it easier for you to do your job well, then choose not to dwell on it. Let that thought enter your mind and pass right back out. Don't attach any importance to it. Don't give it any further thought. Dismiss the thought. Distract yourself. Replace your thoughts with things that are beneficial. Tell yourself, nope, I'm not going to start thinking about this. It's not helpful. There is no good that can come from me constantly replaying this problem in my mind. I'm going to choose not to think thoughts that don't contribute to my mental well-being. I'm just moving on. So those are just a couple questions that you can ask yourself instead of thinking and talking about how bad your situation is. Those questions will help you examine the evidence to support your assumptions. Asking yourself, is the situation totally bad? Is it truly unbearable? Is it possible that the situation may not be the way I perceive it, and there's an alternative explanation? And is it useful or beneficial for me to perceive things this way? You see, the best way to fight disillusionment is to view setbacks as situation-specific, temporary, and changeable. No one has a crystal ball, So most of the time, we don't know for sure if a bad situation is going to be pervasive, meaning if it's going to keep getting worse. We don't know for sure if it's going to be permanent, if it's going to go on for a long time. We don't know for sure if we're going to be powerless to change it, or feeling this sense of hopelessness, right? Pervasive, permanence, powerlessness. These are the hallmarks of a pessimistic outlook on life. Most pessimists don't realize that they are pessimistic. They'll say, I'm just being realistic. These are just the facts. But deciding that a situation is hopeless and unbearable and can never get better and isn't going to change, that's not being realistic. That's simply your perception. If you've never challenged your assumptions about your situation, you're going to automatically be convinced that the way you perceive things is factual, when it's actually just a result of the way that you talk to yourself, the story that you tell yourself about your life. You may not be able to change your circumstance, but you can change the self-talk that colors everything that you see. Challenging pessimistic thought patterns means choosing to see things as they really are, not as they appear to be through the lens of a negative interpretation that you've applied to the situation. Don't take these pessimistic explanations lightly. This is not a harmless habit. Thinking of things in a pessimistic way is really at the root of teacher burnout. When you convince yourself that your work is just not making a difference because there's just too many obstacles in your way, things are not going to get any better, they're probably going to get worse, and you're just helpless to do anything about it. These are all circumstances beyond your control. You've now painted yourself as a victim. You're now the victim of these unfair circumstances. And being a victim is stressful and depressing. So refrain from making a negative guess or a negative assumption or a negative prediction about how your situation is going to go. No matter how dysfunctional things might be at your school, your perspective will determine whether you feel courageous and accomplished or discouraged and defeated. It is certainly possible to overcome disillusionment because we know it is. There's tens of thousands of teachers who manage to do it every single day. You might even know some of them. You may even see people in your school who just keep giving their all day after day after day. Even in the most troubled schools, even the most challenging situations, they still seem to enjoy it. And this is their secret. They have optimistic explanatory styles. They explain life in an optimistic way. They believe that good things are happening and that good things are worth focusing on. They believe that problems are not going to last forever and that their own efforts are making a positive difference. So while the pessimist sees setbacks as permanent, pervasive, and powerless to be changed, the optimist sees setbacks as situation specific and temporary and changeable. You can even choose to see disillusionment itself as situation specific, temporary, and changeable. It's a reality that you're not really loving your job. That's a fact, right? But you can choose to interpret your disillusionment as something that you're just facing right now, something that won't go on forever. It's not going to continue to spiral and get worse. And most importantly, it's not going to be something that's out of your control. You can fight disillusionment. And you do that by concentrating on one day at a time. It's really easy to get sucked into pessimistic thinking when you're trying to take on too much at one time. You're trying to solve not only today's problems, but tomorrow's and next week's and next month, and trying to predict how you're going to balance everything months from now or years from now. So resist the urge to worry about how you're going to balance everything next month or next quarter or next year. It's impossible to predict how certain problems are going to improve and which new issues are going to crop up to take their place. So don't expend too much mental energy on this. And don't start making negative assumptions about how things are going to go. Instead, trust that you will have the wisdom and the strength for each day as it comes. You will know what to do when each problem arises. Choose to be okay with taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. 1 step back. That's just how life goes, right? And that's especially how teaching goes. Don't let that discourage you, because even with the setbacks, even with those steps back, you still come out ahead from where you started, right? You're still moving forward. So choose to be okay with that. Now, if you want to learn more about these explanatory styles and how to train yourself to be more optimistic, how to see things in a more realistic perspective, I've written an entire book about that. It's called Awakened: Change Your Mindset to Transform Your Teaching. There's a whole chapter in there about this pessimistic outlook, this habit that a lot of us have. And I used to have it myself. I had to train myself to think in these new ways and to choose to view my setbacks as situation specific and temporary and changeable. And if I can change it, you can change it too. So if this has really been helpful for you and you feel like this is the kind of work that you need to do on yourself, check out this book, Awakened: Change Your Mindset to Transform Your Teaching, because in the book, I really walk you through step by step exactly what I did and show you all the habits that you want to break and the new habits that you want to create to replace them. And once you change your mindset about teaching, that's going to change your whole experience. All of these problems that seem super overwhelming and are just creating this sense of disillusionment for you are going to feel like something that you can overcome and that you have some control over, and that you're not just powerless. You're not this victim of a bad situation, that you actually have a lot more control than you think you do. So I would love to hear your thoughts on the show. You can go to thecornerstoneforteachers.com/S4EP9 and you can leave your comments there, because this is season 4, episode 9. I would love to hear your thoughts and see what you're struggling with. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope that this has been helpful to those of you who are feeling a little bit disillusioned right now. Have a fantastic week. You can do this. And remember, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it. Truth for Teachers is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more great podcast recommendations, go to edupodcastnetwork.com. That's edupodcastnetwork.com.